Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today I'm going to install the Artillian third function diverter kit. Previously, I've run my third function from my dual rear remote hydraulic ports on the back of the tractor. But at this point, I have other implements that I want to use those hydraulic ports on. This includes the stump grinder I've ordered, which has 2 hydraulic cylinders and requires 2 sets of ports. So obviously I wouldn't be able to have my third function to the front hooked up at the same time as the stump grinder. But I also have a hydraulic top link, and I'd like to add a hydraulic side adjusting link to make it a full top and tilt kit. So let's get started. Alright, so the hydraulic portion of this install was pretty straightforward. If you just follow along with the instructions, you shouldn't have a whole lot of problems setting it up. The electrical portion, on the other hand, doesn't give a whole lot of guidance, and I made a few mistakes that I'd like to help you avoid. So be sure to stick around and watch the electrical part at the end of the video, showing what not to do when setting this kit up. Okay, step 1 is to remove the lines off of the loader that are the black and yellow. We're going to take the top end loose first. Okay, then I'm going to hold that up after it's loose. Okay, once you take the top end of these hoses loose from the hard lines, you disconnect the quick connects for the black and the yellow. After you disconnect the other end of these 2 lines, you're going to pull them through the protective sheeting. It mentions that if you pull them out from the top like this, it's going to make less of a mess. Because unlike what I just did, if you hold on to this end, you're not going to lose the hydraulic fluid that's in the lines. Okay, then we will go ahead and dump this hydraulic fluid so it doesn't spill later, and then we'll save these hoses in case we ever want to go back to the original configuration or possibly even another use. Okay, so now we're going to install the actual diverter. You want to take and orient it with the diverter solenoids pointing back towards the rear of the tractor. And then these 2 parts right here are a clamp that goes around the frame of the loader, and tighten with these bolts right here. So now I've got the diverter mounted onto the loader frame. It was hard to get a really good shot of putting that on, just how tight it is in between to get the camera and a light in there. But we've got it on, and now it says to install this gang of 2 hoses. So we have 2 hose packs. One of them has 2 hoses, the other one has 4. These are marked P1 and P2. The side of the diverter that points this way is also marked P1 and P2. So we'll go ahead and put those on. Alright, so we have our P1 and P2 hydraulic lines connected. Then we have 2 electrical connectors here that just plug in on the other side. Yellow and black. My setup looks a little crowded here because these are my extra hydraulic lines that ran from the rear remote. I have not yet decided if those are going to stay on here as a backup or if they're going to come off. Alright, so the first set of hoses are hooked up. Alright, so now we're connecting our front ports. This is where the actual hydraulic lines for the implement will plug in. This has a really simple system with basically just a giant hose clamp that goes around right here. Alright, so this came with these 2 smaller diameter hoses and the 2 larger diameter hoses, all wrapped in the same protective sheathing. It says to remove these 2 and route them up the frame of the loader. Once again, mine's a little more complicated because I've got these 2 extra lines, but it looks like they can just poke right in between these. Alright, so once these are routed through, you're going to use zip ties to hold them in place. Alright, this is another spot that's going to be really difficult to see, but you've got your 2 solenoids right here, and then behind them you have 4 hydraulic connections, A1, B1, A2, B2. And then you've got these 4 hoses that we just routed up the loader that have the same markings. Now we just connect those 4 hoses to those 4 connections. Alright, in the category of things you figure out as you go, and you guys should do early on, it's worth it to lift the hood and take the side panel off of the engine compartment where you're working. Gives you a lot more access. I didn't figure this out until I'd already kind of fought with it a little bit. And also in my case, I'm not sure why I didn't take my extra hoses off at the beginning, just to have them out of the way because they can pop right back on. So I'm gonna get back to it. Alright, now we have all of our hydraulic lines connected to the diverter. We just have to attach them to the original lines right here for the loader and tighten everything up. Alright, so we've made all the hydraulic connections. The loader should now function normally. We won't have a third function yet until we hook up the electrical component, but now's a good time to stop and make sure that there's no leaks and that everything's working. So I'll go ahead and let the hood down just for visibility and start it up. At this point, the hydraulic install is complete. We have to hook up the electric. Right here is the switch you'll actually use to divert the hydraulic flow. But it is too long for where the bend is on this controller. So it says if your switch is longer than it is down to the first bend, you pop these tabs right here. Push on those 2 tabs and these 2 tabs. This housing comes off and you have just this button right here. That's going to mount right there, but before we put it on, it says to get in the seat and get a feel for where you're going to want that button to be configured. So I think you're going to want it right here, like that. Alright, now it's time to hook up the electrical portion of this install. And I mentioned earlier that I made several mistakes. So I want to show you what not to do before I show you what actually ended up working. I made this seem complicated as I was trying to do it. And it ended up being, the way I finally ran it was very simple. Alright, so when I started this, I was thinking about a video I'd seen previously where someone ran the wire right down this through the center, and that's what I started off to do. I took these 2 bolts loose here and took this lever off. That's a mistake. You don't want to take that off. There's linkages underneath that fall off and it's really awkward to get them back on. It's also difficult to get the boot back on once you take it loose. So I would say don't mess with this. Then I remembered another video I saw where they drilled a hole through the plastic right here to feed the wire through. You don't want to do that either. Almost all the videos that I could find removed the floorboard, and I found a way to do it that didn't require that. So let me just show you what I did. Alright, so the way I ran my electrical wiring is I put the button on the loader joystick the way it tells you to in the instructions, and then it kind of leaves you on your own from there. So I ran it down the joystick, taped it up really well with electrical tape just so it's not flopping around. Now if you have a 2038R, you already have these fender mount work lights, and there's an opening right here that's big enough to push your wires through. Then I removed this screw and this screw. That allowed me to lift this up enough to get this wire fished through, and then right underneath this there are two holes that go down into the fender. And so I pushed the wires through here and then through that hole out the bottom of the fender, and then I'll show you where it went from there. Alright, in front of the rear tire there's holes on the other side of this fender right here. The wires came out there and ran down behind the fenders. Alright, after the wire came down the fenders, there's a gap right here that I tucked the wires up into, and they fit up in there tight and don't want to sag down. Then I followed that around here. You can see the two wires are right here, and they run over to these hydraulic lines. I zip tied them to the hydraulic lines. Then I brought those two lines up here. The red and the black power wire can go behind this right here up into the engine compartment, and at that point those wires are completely ran and out of view. So the second wire that runs with that is this gray one. It ran exactly the same way as the other one. Then it came up here and plugs in to the solenoid wire that we ran with the hydraulic lines. This is zip tied to our loader lines. Now let me show you how I got power from the battery. This could be done in several different ways, but I decided the simplest thing for me was to run it all the way to the battery. Okay, so I picked up a roll of red wire and a roll of black wire from AutoZone, and a couple of these round connectors that would slide over the terminal bolt. I put those two wires on and then ran them down through this hole that's already in the bottom of the engine compartment. When those wires come out of the battery compartment right here, I just ran them with these hydraulic lines. I actually zip tied one to the hydraulic line. I'll cut this off, and then it goes up under this shroud and runs straight up to the other set of wires. At that point, we have our red and black wire coming from the switch and our red and black wire coming from the battery. They already provide you with a fuse, so all I had to do was connect the red to the red and the black to the black right here, and then I'm gonna just wrap electrical tape around these and zip tie those right up under here, and it'll all be tucked out of the way. You really are never going to notice this wire hanging anywhere, and it has no chance of getting snagged or caught in anything. So once I decided that this is how I wanted to do it, it really didn't take any time at all. I originally wanted to tie it into the 12-volt power supply up at the operator station, but the way they run their harnesses, it would have been harder to tie into it there. And then I wanted to add it to the breaker box, but that also would have been difficult because you have to order a different kind of connector to go into that. So what I did, I think, is a good solution, and it's fairly easy to do, and I hope that helps you out. Alright, well that's it for the install. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video, and in a minute, a couple more of our videos are going to come on the screen right here. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.